Apologies from Matt Barry, the Chief Executive of Freelancer, who was unable to attend the event at the last minute, but filling his shoes is Darren Williams, who is the Chief Technology Officer of freelancer.com.au, the world's largest outsourcing marketplace connecting over 3 million professionals from around the globe and in the top 250 websites globally. Freelancer.com primarily connects small businesses and individuals from the Western world with freelancers in the developing world, empowering entrepreneurs on both sides of the globe. To date, more than 1.3 million projects have been outsourced through freelancer.com. Would you welcome Darren Williams?
So I want to give a slightly different perspective on, I guess, the future of work, but touch on a lot of the topics that have been talked about today. There is a real change coming in the way that work happens, both for Australians and people around the world. At the moment, the number of people on the internet is growing at an amazing rate. There's been huge take-up, but there's still 70% of the world's population that are yet to join. It is, in fact, 2012, and we have 32% of the world on the internet, and this has been an incredible number. We've got huge websites out there that really touch lives, particularly in the developed world. But the penetration of the internet around the globe has been erratic. In Australia, it's very high. We have over 90% of us on the internet. We use it for our shopping. We use it for services. We use it for government services these days. It's really changed lives. But as you look around the globe, that picture is very, very different. In the developed world, it's excellent, and that has meant a lot of business has moved online, a lot of industry is now conducted online. We all know of major websites that are really changing lives. But if we look at Eastern Europe with well-educated workforces, but still very low levels of internet penetration. If we look at Asia, there are very few people on the internet compared to the total population. Only 1 billion of people in Asia are on the net. Now, that's a very, very large number, but it still leaves another 2.8 billion to come. And similarly, that's been changing, and it's been changing rapidly. In the decade from 2000 to 2010, we saw a ginormous growth in the number of people that were joining the internet, and that the growth really came from the developing world. If we look at where we were at the start of that decade in 2000, we had the dot-com boom, and the thing that mattered if you wanted to do business on the internet was, do you have an American user base? At the time, our ideas of doing business on the internet were very different, and the kinds of work that was being conducted were very different. There's been a radical shift over the last decade. Now, there's still a lot of money in America, there's still a lot of Americans on the internet, but even for the big American names that you can think of on the net, very few, well, no longer is it remotely a majority of Americans on these sites. In many cases, it's 20% lower of their total user base. And that has seen a radical change for everything that is happening. In 4 years from 2007 to 2010, China added 246 million internet users, which is more than the total number of people that the US has online. And this has seen, as we said, a radical change in what's going on. Now, that's the first pillar of a wave that's coming and changing the way that work is done. Simultaneously, these people are getting online, and they're finding that it is easier than ever to learn a trade. And these can be micro trades, very simple things. You can learn fairly easily how to use the tools to do logo design, to use the tools for graphic design, through to much, much more complex things. We've seen a massive wave change from the universities where they're opening up things like you can do the MIT Introduction to Quantum Mechanics course. You can not just do the introductory course, you can go on and do advanced courses in quantum mechanics, in artificial intelligence. Stanford opened up this course, a free course. There's assessments, certificates at the end, and they very quickly got swamped by requests. They took longer to getting actually started with the course as a result, but 170,000 people enrolled in it. 8 times the total number of students there are for all of Stanford across every faculty. And this is just a single course. Now, this is an introduction to artificial intelligence, but it went through, it's a very significant course in terms of going through all the theory, and people coming out the other side of that course would have a very good grounding in a deep and complex area. The largest of these online training sites at the moment is the Khan Academy. They've delivered over 70 million different tutorials. You can go there and essentially learn everything, every basic high school subject from start to finish. You can sit there and watch in 5-minute increments videos going through everything from basic maths, basic geography, history, biology, through to what's happening in the financial crisis. Why do I get heart disease? And they're looked at with rigour, and you're walked through examples for everything, whether it is your maths or whether it's how does the heart work, advanced physics. And these sorts of courses mean that as the developing world comes online, where they are arriving, initially, the first wave were people that tended to be well-educated. The Indians that had joined the net had been through the IIT. They were well-educated. But the next subsequent waves have been of people less educated, but with access now. They've been able to expose themselves to education in ways that were relatively unthinkable in the past. Now, there's a third pillar to this. At the same time as they're joining the internet, they're able to get training, whether that's in an amazingly specific vertical that they're interested in at the time, through to very broad areas. But at the same time, all of the industries that they're looking at are increasingly digitised. And this has been a sea change that we've seen in our own workplaces, but it's accelerating throughout most industries. So that if you want to be an architect, it's a heavily computer-based profession these days. The tools are there. If you want to do design of almost any form, you really can have the entire process digitised. And what this allows is for the work to be done remotely. When we're entirely dealing with digital goods and we're applying our skills entirely in a digital way, the work being done can be done entirely remotely. So we saw a massive sea change in the way our manufactured goods worked. We'd had a globalised world for quite a long time, but we saw a huge change when a lot of manufacturing moved out of the Western world into China, but not just China, into the developing world. And that changed the way things were for the manufacturers, yes, but it also changed the price of our goods. It changed the way they were delivered. It unleashed a massive change on our societies that we dealt with. But that same change is happening for services right now as the developing world is arriving with education into digitalised fields in massive, massive numbers. Thomas Friedman, the Pulitzer Prize-winning author and journalist, said that the world's becoming flat. We're entering a society where we go along, we can have a routine medical scan done, it can be examined by someone in Shanghai, we can, and reported back, we can have our taxes done by someone in the Philippines. And in the same way that we've gone from not thinking at all about internet shopping to it being a very accepted thing, the same change with services is happening right now. So at freelancer.com, what we do is largely help facilitate this global labour exchange. Excuse me. We're looking to empower the entrepreneurs globally, and this really means that entrepreneurs, whether it's service providers or people looking for efficiencies in their businesses in Australia, have a way to meet that exchange of labour. In the West, we can provide the productivity tools, we can deliver that labour to you to get a job done that you've had done in the past, something, it might be simple like logo design, but you can get it done right now and you can get it delivered through to incredibly complex tasks, and I'll take you through some examples. But in the emerging economies, service organisations have a way to deliver to me, sitting in my office, services quickly and easily. So Freelancer is the world's largest outsourcing marketplace. We have combined a number of the smaller ones around the globe, both regional players and global players. We have over 4 million users at the moment in every country and region of the world. We have had projects posted literally from Antarctica to everywhere. There's it's about 2.5 million now projects have been posted. At any given day, thousands of projects appear. And over $150 million worth of projects have been done through the site. It's roughly equivalent in terms of what you would otherwise be spending to over $500 million worth of money. We are in the top 300 websites as measured by Alexa, so we're the largest Australian-run internet property. Around the world, that translates in a lot of the countries that provide services to us having quite large exposure in places like Bangladesh, which has 155 million people in it. We're the 21st biggest website, ahead of people like Microsoft. And that's because increasingly, places like Bangladesh, India, Eastern Europe are making real money out of delivering services to the Western world. This is a map of the globe showing where, for a sample of our projects, where work is posted from, who wants the work done, and where the work's provided, with the red end showing who is asking for the work, saying, I would like this job done, and where the work is being done with the green end. And as you can see, that certainly in our case, the vast majority of the services offered are from the developed world to the developing world. Now, this doesn't just happen for the same price as it happens when you go and sort someone locally. The costs tend to be somewhere between 1/10 and 1/5 of what you otherwise might find it locally, depending entirely on the category of work, and there's, hundreds of different types of work that people do. There is some, and in terms of the numbers, there are actually significant amounts of work that does go to the developed world. But if you look at the individual cases, it's much more like in areas of I want Australian voiceovers. Australians tend to get that work, funnily enough. But there is also a large number of employers from countries like India, who are our third biggest employer, as increasingly the developing world has a range of jobs that they're looking themselves. They have both a middle class and classes that are coming up and looking for this kind of work. So for us, it's a very similar experience to eBay, where on eBay you post something, I have a good, I want to sell you, someone comes along, says I want to buy the good. For us, people post a project, I want some work done. Freelancers, as we call them, the people looking for work, the service providers, bid on projects saying, I will build your website for X dollars. You'll describe what you want. You'll look through the freelancers and choose one or more, depending on the style of work that you're after, and then pay when you're happy with the delivery of the work. Each of the freelancers has a profile, so it's an online resume, if you like, similar to the eBay model, where they build up reputation. People rate them, say, this guy did excellent work for me. And so you can look through their past reviews. And then as they've bid on projects, you get an opportunity to look at them. They have certifications, they've passed our basic English exams, they've shown they've got specific technical skills. You can also look through their work history, the kinds of things other people have been saying, and then choose someone for the job. Obviously, price is also going to be a factor for a lot of people. Now, that might be all very well if what you want is a logo and you're thinking, great, I can get a logo now. I no longer have to call someone locally. But there's actually quite a massive range of different things that you can get done. Packaging design, architecture, brochures, anything that can be delivered digitally. There's more and more people just doing this, running small local businesses. This is a Business Week article about a real estate consultancy, how they've been outsourcing work all over the world and allowing themselves to be both flexible, get a good price for their services, while delivering their own service to their customers and controlling the customer experience well. Now, as I said, logos, you're thinking, okay, that's a pretty straightforward thing. This is an example of a logo contest on our site where you've asked for work for a design for your company all about girls, perhaps. And the freelancers have provided, in this case, 278 different logos, and it's a contest. A single one gets chosen as the winner, and they've found someone for it. These get posted a lot for business cards, lots of those design sort of projects. And then the next step might be something like an application. You want an iPhone application for your business. In this example, we have a manga reader, a comic reader for the iPhone. But they can get increasingly complex. Design a fully functional dune buggy that I can drive at 30 kilometres an hour. It's a design. You can deliver that over the internet. I want a Wi-Fi controlled lawn sprinkler assembly. Now, almost any of these sorts of designs can now get done remotely. Here, there's an average bid of $270 for a government logo for Chile, as Chile was held a competition. An Australian firm, Carpaccio, with their car wash and cafe design, they wanted to understand how can we better have set up our flow for our cafe car wash combination, and so on through to modelling of chemical engineering. I want to find an underpants manufacturer for my radical new underpants business, through to composing a rap song to help Chinese students learn English. there's a huge swath of different things that can be done, and the real limits are of our imagination. The changes are happening in the way we think about our work and the way we expose ourselves. We wanted to know what we'd get if we just held a generic expose our logo competition for $25,000, and it turns out a lot will happen around the world. In Bangladesh, there were whole towns that turned out and held fairs. The winner was a significant event at a NASCAR competition in Florida. But there were banners on roadsides, news occurrences, and all over the world, everywhere this happened. So where does this leave us for the future of work in Australia? The hyperconnectivity of both the people and the computers is here, and it's here to stay, and this change is happening. We have easy access to workers, easy access to skills, and we're not even thinking, I think, of half the applications that will remotely be used in even 20 years' time. But at the same time, Australia is actually quite ideally suited for this. We have excellent connectivity here. The NBN, whether people like it as a policy or not, will deliver excellent network connections. I think most of the arguments are about cost and whether this is the place we should be investing our money. Australia has excellent connections to the places where the biggest expansions are happening, both in cultural connections, people connections, as well as direct internet connections. We're localised to the geographies, and we have a highly skilled and educated workforce that can take advantage of these situations to deliver, I think, a better, more productive Australia, as well as a better and more productive world. Thank you.
Darren, I just wonder how you define the limits to the implications of this, the limits to the talking about work, talking about jobs, limits to the export of jobs. Once you start encroaching into highly trained professional areas like the law and accounting and architecture and so on, what is the limit? I guess you'd say, well, obviously you can't totally export a doctor's job. Somebody's, if it requires hands-on work, but it seems to me that if you're at the end where you're starting to plan a career, how on earth do you factor this in? How do you work out what jobs are going to be safe for you to actually plan a career on 10 years from now?
I mean, I think this has been somewhat a theme of today, that we need to look after our own skills and maintain them. And I think one of the advantages Australia has is we do have a generally high-skilled workforce. And obviously there are jobs, the laying of the bricks for my house is going to stay a local job. But I think that we don't have a good understanding of where the limits are. I mean, you even mentioned, say, a doctor that needs to examine you. Lots of medical procedures today are already broken up between a radiographer and a radiologist, where one is a technical skill and the other one is a much more highly trained, they're both highly trained, but one is a medical skill and one is a technical skill, if you like. So I don't think that we're remotely approaching the limits of what will happen. I think the world is increasingly globalised, and services and skills will be a massive part of that.
But when you hear the picture painted in a country like China or India, where the training process that's going on there, the education processes, the explosion of universities and the extent to which they're trying to suck in the skills from around the world to enhance their own teaching. And as you imagine the millions of these trained young Chinese or Indians or whatever, and if their labour is going to be available remotely, much cheaper than in a country like Australia, isn't there an automatic process going to take place here?
There is somewhat, but these are the challenges that a dynamic economy is best suited to deal with. If I pay $50 to someone in Shanghai to look at my medical scans versus $200 in Australia, I still have $150 in my pocket. And that allows us to increase our productivity. I will then spend that again, my $150,
Right.
and we are better off overall, not to mention the fact that the standards of living around the world then are being raised as well. And I think for us to just look at it in a purely insular sense is the wrong way to look at it.
Darren Williams, thank you very much.